Witness the glory, the chaos, the rise and fall of Europe.
Today, we're diving into one of the most terrifying and honestly one of the most transformational events in all of human history. We're talking about a catastrophe so huge, it didn't just kill millions of people. It basically killed an entire world and then built a new one right from the ashes. This is the story of the plague that truly turned Europe into hell. So let's just start with a number, because there's really no other way to even begin to wrap your head around the scale of this. 200 million. That's the rough estimate of how many people died across the world. It's a number so big it almost feels fake, but it's the foundation for everything that's about to come next.
To really understand the sheer impact of the plague, we have to go back. We have to look at the world right before the storm hit. And what you find is a world just teetering on a knife's edge, with absolutely no idea it was about to fall into the abyss.
So, try to picture it. We're in the mid-1300s. Europe's cities are getting jam-packed, sanitation is, well, not really a thing, and these new trade routes, like the Silk Road, are connecting east and west like never before. The world was buzzing, it was full of energy, but that very interconnectedness, it created the perfect superhighway for a killer.
And then it came. Not like an invading army you could see on the horizon, or a volcano erupting. Nope, this came as an invisible, silent tide of death that was about to wash over the entire continent.
The crazy thing is that the source of this apocalypse was just terrifying the ordinary. It wasn't some kind of divine wrath or a cosmic event. It was a simple bacterium, Yersinia pestis, that lived on fleas, which in turn lived on black rats. And these rats, they were just hitching rides on merchant ships and caravans, traveling all the way from Asia carrying absolute doom in their bloodstreams.
And the speed was just unbelievable. It pops up in Central Asia in the 1330s. By 1346, it's at a major port on the Black Sea. Just 1 year later, it's already in Italy and France. By 1348, it's swallowing Paris and London whole. In less than 5 years, it had infected pretty much every corner of the known European world. There was no stopping it. So this brings us to the heart of the horror. What was it actually like to live through what they called the Great Dying? It was an experience so traumatic, it literally scarred the human psyche for centuries to come. The agent behind all this death was this little guy, Yersinia pestis. The science behind it is pretty simple, but the result was anything but. The second it got inside a human host, it just unleashed this cascade of biological failures that were swift, brutal, and almost always fatal. And this is what it did to a person. It would start with a fever, chills. But it quickly spiraled into pure agony. These incredibly painful, swollen lumps, called buboes, would erupt in the armpits and groin. Then came the internal bleeding, which caused the skin to turn dark. And that's actually how the Black Death got its terrifying name. From your first symptom to your death was often just a handful of days.
50%! Seriously, just let that sink in. The best estimates we have suggest that in just a few years, the Black Death killed half of the entire population of Europe. I mean, stop and think about that. 1 out of every 2 people you knew, just gone.
This quote, this isn't from some historian looking back hundreds of years later. This is from a guy in Siena, Angelo di Tura, writing as it was happening. He wrote about having to abandon the dead in ditches, layer by layer, like lasagna, because there was literally no one left to bury them. Society itself was just breaking down. As he said, everyone truly believed it was the end of the world. But it wasn't the end, and this is where the story takes a wild turn. In a strange, brutal paradox, from the embers of this unimaginable catastrophe, a whole new world would be forged. This is the huge twist in the story, right? The plague was a reset button that nobody asked for and nobody wanted. But by wiping the slate clean so violently, it accidentally created the perfect conditions for a completely new kind of Europe to rise from the ashes. This right here shows you the change in the starkest terms possible. Before the plague, you have this rigid feudal system. You've got a massive surplus of peasants who work for next to nothing and have zero power. After the plague, with half the workforce dead, labor is suddenly rare. It's valuable. The entire power dynamic of society got flipped completely on its head.
And this right here is the key. This is the whole game changer. For the first time in centuries, an ordinary person, a farmer, an artisan, had leverage. They could actually demand higher wages.
They could leave their land to find a better deal somewhere else. Serfdom, the very bedrock of the medieval world, started to crumble. Not because of a war or a revolution, but because of a bacterium.
So you see, the plague kicked off this massive domino effect. People's faith in the church was shaken when all their prayers couldn't stop the dying. The economy was completely turned upside down by the new scarcity of labor, and culturally, a society that had stared death right in the face came out with this intense new focus on life, on humanity, on the individual, the very ideas that would eventually blossom into the Renaissance.
And that leaves us with this final, unavoidable question, doesn't it? The Black Death was an absolute disaster, no question about it, but it forced a radical reinvention of society. It just goes to show that history is often forged in these moments of extreme crisis, which really makes you wonder, what new world might be emerging from the crises of our own time?